and welcome to my channel, Naughty Gnome Crafts. My name is Sarah, and you can find me as Naughty Gnome on Instagram. If you are a new or returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me today, and I have a review for you, which is going to be two very similar patterns that I'm going to compare and contrast and let you know which one was my favorite. Plus, you're going to want to stay tuned to the end of the video because I have a bonus lookbook of 11 different ways to style this type of tank top. So before we get started, I will just let you know what I'm wearing. Today I am wearing my Jennifer Lauren handmade Hunter tank that I just finished in a white linen, and I will insert a photo of me wearing my outfit so you can see how it looks on. I just paired it with some ready to wear Old Navy denim shorts that I've had forever. So the two patterns that we're going to be talking about today are the Paradise Patterns Blomma tank and the Viki Sews Veronica. I really like this style of tank top. It's a very form-fitting top, and I like these because you can wear them year-round. You can wear them obviously in the summertime without anything else over it, but they're also really good for layering in the winter. You can use them as a base layer. And for both of these tops, I used a bamboo rib knit fabric that I got from Blackbird fabrics. I bought the same fabric in two different colorways because I wanted my pattern reviews to be, for them to be a good comparison so that the only difference is the pattern, the fabric's really the same. And I bought a meter of each color of fabric, and I have probably about a third of a yard left over with both. It did not take a ton of fabric, but I would say it took more than half a meter. So first of all, let's talk about access to the patterns. So the Blomma tank is available on the Paradise Patterns Etsy shop. However, it says right in the description that if you sign up for her newsletter, you can download the top for free, and that is what I did. The Viki Sews pattern is available in two different ways. You can either buy it on the Russian website and you would be paying in rubles. When I purchased the pattern a few months ago, she was having a sale, and with the exchange rate, I ended up paying $1.70 USD for the Veronica. But now I believe that she also has an option that you can purchase her Viki Sews patterns on the Foldline website, and the instructions are in English. The version that I got off of the Russian website, all the instructions and all the pattern language is in Russian, but there is an English version that you can get from the Foldline, and I will link both patterns in the description box below so that you can check it out for yourself. So based on the price, one is free, one was $1.70. To me, that's basically a wash. I don't really consider one better than the other in that regard. Now for the sizing, the Blomma tank has two different versions. Both versions are in size from 0 to 16, and I will put the sizing charts on the screen so you can see them. And there's a B cup version and a D cup version. And I made the size 2 B cup version. Now Viki Sews is a little bit different. Basically, you only buy your size, which has its pros and cons, and I'll get to that. Her sizing for the Veronica goes from size 34 to 46, and I will put the Viki Sews sizing chart on the screen, but just be warned that I guess like her sizing, some of it goes up higher than the size 46, but for the Veronica, it specifically is only in sizes 34 to 46, and you would purchase just your size. And then she also has height options, which go from 154 to 184 centimeters. So what's really great about that is that you choose your size and your height, and then theoretically you don't need to make length adjustments because it's already suited to your height. So that's a really interesting and unique feature of Viki Sews patterns that I haven't really seen a lot with other pattern companies. For the Veronica, I made the size 36 in the 154 centimeter height, which is the shortest height. And I don't have it converted here, but 154 centimeters is still taller than me, but it's the closest I'm gonna get. Okay, let's talk about printing and assembling the pattern. Both patterns come with an A4/letter version, and they also have an AO copy shop version. I did the print at home and tape together. I just prefer to do it that way. I own a printer, I already made that investment, and I'm one of those weirdos who actually enjoys cutting out and taping the patterns together. I find it relaxing. So that's the option that I chose. The Blomma tank is 12 pages, and the Veronica is, well, for my size, it was 8 pages. Keep in mind that the Veronica, you're going to be purchasing your size, and so the number of pages might be different for a different size. But for me, it was 8 pages. So either way, it's not a whole lot of pages to be cutting out and taping together. They were both easy to assemble. The Blomma tank does not come with a layers function, so you will be printing all the sizes and then you'll need to cut your size. And of course, the Veronica, you only receive one size, and so it's much easier to know what size you are clearly. And also, the Veronica comes with seam allowance markings. So I will just show you really quick the front pattern piece of each so you can kind of get an idea. This is the Blomma. The lines are quite dark and they're labeled really well. This inside line here is not a seam allowance, it's actually the smaller size. And the Veronica, the printing is quite light, but it was still visible, and you can kind of see here that it has these seam allowances on the pattern, which is actually for this particular pattern that's really handy because the instructions and all of the writing is in Russian. And so I was able to just measure with my ruler what the seam allowances were, and the pattern is so simple that I didn't really need to look at the written instructions as long as you know what the seam allowance and hem allowances are. The only other note that I have about the pattern is that I will warn you that for the Veronica, the armbands and the neckband pieces are pretty similar in length. And so you're gonna wanna probably mark them in some way so that you know which is which, because I wasn't paying attention and I serged all of my neckband and armband pieces together at the same time. And then I had a little bit of trouble figuring out which one was the neckband piece because it was just really similar in length to the armbands. So that's one thing to note for the Veronica. Now let's talk about the fit. The Blomma tank has a little bit of a straighter fit from the waist to the hip. It's not as curvy, whereas the Veronica is pretty curvy. It curves in dramatically and then curves back out. And initially, when I was just looking at the pattern pieces, I was a little bit concerned about that because I myself am not very curvy. I was worried it wasn't going to fit me, but we'll talk a little bit in a second about how that worked out. So I'm gonna just show you the front pattern pieces again. So as you can see on the Veronica, like how much it curves in at the waist and then back out at the hip, whereas the Blomma is really much straighter from the pattern piece. And if I kind of fold them up together, hopefully, I know this is hard, but hopefully you can kind of see the difference. So you can see how much the Veronica curves in at the waist, whereas the Blomma is really quite straight. And actually the Veronica is quite a bit wider at the hip also. The Veronica is just a little bit longer than the Blomma. And let's talk about the way that these two tops fit me. So I think that I will be inserting some, hopefully, pictures that are side by side of me in both tops, just with black leggings, so with it untucked, like not styled, just so you can see what it looks like with a front view and a back view of the fit of the tops. Now, as I had said, I was worried about the Veronica being really curvy and it wasn't going to fit me, but actually I found that the Veronica fits my shape better than the Blomma. The Blomma turned out to be a little bit tight in the hip. I think because it is so straight, it doesn't curve out at the hip. That my hip measurement is technically actually my widest measurement. And so I think that's why the Veronica fit me a little bit better, because there is a little bit more ease in the hip. Like I said, the Veronica is also just a smidge longer than the Blomma. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. And otherwise, I would say that the fit up in the chest area is really good because both tanks have negative ease. They are meant to be form-fitting over the body, and I think that the fit is pretty good with both of them, but I will give the point to the Veronica that it fits just a little bit better for me in the hip. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the design details, and that will kind of lead me into the construction. So there are some design differences in these tanks. The main feature of the Blomma tank that makes it unique is that it has wider bands. It has this wide armband and a wide neckband, whereas the Veronica has much thinner stitching. And so when they're worn, they look really similar, but that is the primary difference in design between the two tops. Now, that leads me to talking about construction, and this is where, for me, it really diverges between the two. Let's actually talk about the Veronica first. So both tops are finished with neckbands and armbands that actually it's a binding. It's a neck binding and arm binding that you stitch it to the outside, you turn it to the inside so there is a raw edge here, and then you just cover stitch or twin needle on the outside. I was being lazy, if I'm going to be 100% honest. I could have done a better job of cover stitching like over the raw edge, or I could actually go back in and trim off the raw edge. But again, I was feeling a little bit lazy. It's not going to fray or anything, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's how the Veronica is constructed. Whereas with the Blomma, to get with these wide bands, what the instructions tell you to do is you're supposed to use your sewing machine and stitch the binding on at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then you're supposed to stitch again at a 3/4 inch seam allowance. And then you turn these wide binding pieces to the inside and do your cover stitch or twin needle. Now, this purely has to do with me and my laziness, but I'm just gonna give it to you straight. I did not like the way that the Blomma neckline and armholes were constructed, because on a knit garment, if I don't need to get out my sewing machine, I don't want to. I wanna just use my serger and my cover stitch and not have to deal with 3 machines trying to set them up and everything. And I didn't like the way that the instructions told you to use your sewing machine to stitch the neckline and the armholes twice before you do the cover stitch. I was just like, okay, I don't need to do this. I understand why you're supposed to do the narrow stitch and then the 3/4 stitch. It's because when you flip the binding piece to the inside, technically then these pieces here would be stuffed, like there would be seam allowance inside there. But I was like, that's not really necessary. So I just went ahead and serged at the one time at the 3/4 inch seam allowance, and it cut off the excess, and then flipped it to the inside and stitched it down. Now, because I was working with 3/4 inch seam allowances, it's really difficult to be accurate the wider that your seam allowance is. And so I did end up with some little puckers and tucks and stuff because it was just really difficult to be accurate when I was seaming on these pieces with my serger. So if I were to go back and do the Blomma tank again, what I would do is I would change the pattern pieces of the front backs and then the bands or the binding to just make them be 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then I could just turn it and stitch like I do with a Veronica. I personally just think that it's simpler. The design feature of those wide bands just doesn't matter to me. I mean, I know that some people might like that feature. To me, it doesn't make any difference. And so I prefer the Veronica, the look of the Veronica, the ease of putting it together. And so that was the major difference to me between the two tops. And my preference is pretty strongly for the Veronica because it's easier to put together and I don't care about that wide binding. It's not a feature that's really important to me. I also just wanted to add that both patterns seemed to be really well drafted. They went together very easily. So to me, that was pretty equal on both. And the last topic I'm gonna detail are the instructions. Now, with the caveat that I'm an American who does not read Russian, and so my assessment of the instructions is gonna be a little bit skewed because obviously one set of instructions is in Russian. So for the Blomma tank, it's mostly diagrams with written instructions. I found them to be very clear. Maybe they were just a teeny bit on the wordy side, like for my preference, but I think that those kind of hand-holding instructions are really good for beginners, and so I do think that you will not have any difficulty whatsoever following the instructions for Paradise Patterns. For the Veronica, it comes with written instructions in Russian, and then it also is accompanied by photos. Now, normally, I'm not a photos girl. I prefer technical drawings rather than photos, but I will say that the Viki Sews photos were really clear. I didn't have any problem figuring out what you were supposed to do. And I know that you can hold up your phone with Google Translate and translate the Russian. I didn't bother to do any of that because just by looking at the photos and knowing what the seam allowances were because they're written on the pattern, I was able to very easily and successfully assemble the Veronica without bothering to figure out what the Russian instructions said. So I would say that if you've made tank tops before, if you know how knits generally go together, if you're familiar with it, then you shouldn't have any problems constructing the Veronica, even without trying to figure out what the Russian instructions say. If you're a beginner and you've never made a tank top before, I do think that that's going to be more difficult for you. However, you could possibly try to purchase the English version on the fold line, and I don't have that version, so I don't know if the instructions are good or not, but based on the very clear photos, I would think that you should be able to successfully put that together as well. So my final verdict is that I really like the Veronica. I like both tanks and I will definitely wear both versions, but in the future, if I were gonna make more of these, I would reach for the Veronica over the Blomma. And so for me, that's my clear preference. However, if you're someone who needs the D-cup sizing or you're not ready to tackle Russian instructions, you might prefer the Blomma. It is free. So I just think really either way, you're not gonna go wrong, but it's just for my preference, I liked the Veronica better than the Blomma. So thank you so much for tuning into this review. If you would like to see more of these comparison type reviews, hit the like button because it'll give me an idea of what kind of videos you guys like to see. And I am going to leave you with a lookbook of 11 different outfits that I have styled these tops for all different seasons. They're so versatile that basically you can wear them with anything, but if you happen to have these patterns, or if you just have tanks like this in your wardrobe and you're not quite sure how to wear them, go ahead and check out the lookbook and you can get some outfit ideas. Plus, make sure that you subscribe to my channel because on Wednesday, I'm going to be back with my May monthly makes, and I will have even more outfit combinations for these two tanks that you will see in that video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.